Have you ever noticed that the loudest man in the room is almost always the weakest? You have probably been there. Someone disrespects you, tries to manipulate you, or throws toxic comments your way. Your heart beats faster. Your blood boils. Your instinct tells you to strike back, to prove them wrong, to show them you cannot be messed with. So you engage, you argue, you raise your voice, and at that exact moment, you have already lost. You just handed over the keys to your nervous system to a complete fool. What if I told you that the ultimate display of dominance requires absolutely zero aggression? There is a hidden truth about power that only a fraction of men will ever understand. The elite do not fight for control. They already have it. In this video, we are going to tear down everything you thought you knew about defending yourself against toxic people. You will discover how to neutralize manipulators, narcissists, and energy vampires without uttering a single defensive word. This knowledge separates the masters of reality from the victims of circumstance. Before we begin, ask yourself this: who controlled your emotions yesterday? Drop a comment below right now and admit who got under your skin, because by the end of this video, that will never happen again. We live in an era of unprecedented emotional fragility. Everywhere you look, people are offended, triggered, and desperately seeking validation through conflict. The modern world is a breeding ground for toxic individuals. You deal with them at work, in your social circles, and sometimes even in your own home. These are the passive-aggressive colleagues, the manipulative partners, the people who thrive on drama and chaos. For the average man, navigating this landscape is an exhausting battle. You constantly feel like you have to defend your boundaries, explain your actions, and fight for your peace of mind. But every time you engage in their games, you are playing by their rules. The traditional advice tells you to communicate your feelings, to set boundaries through dialogue, or to fight fire with fire. But let us be brutally honest. That does not work against a truly toxic person. They do not care about your feelings, and they feed on your fire. The real problem is not their toxicity, it is your reaction to it. You have been conditioned to believe that silence is submission, and that ignoring an insult is a sign of cowardice. But in the realm of high-level psychology, the exact opposite is true. We are going to look at a modernized framework of emotional detachment. No ancient quotes, no dusty history books, just raw, actionable psychology for the modern man who wants to reclaim his absolute power. The illusion of the argument. Most men believe that defending their honor in a shouting match is a sign of dominance. This is a massive mistake. When a toxic person pulls you into a conflict, they are not looking for a resolution. They are looking for a reaction. They are starving for your emotional energy. Imagine throwing a bucket of premium fuel onto a small, worthless fire. That is exactly what you do when you argue with a manipulator. You validate their existence. You prove that they have the power to alter your heart rate, disrupt your peace, and control your thoughts. What distinguishes a truly strong man from the rest is the realization that participation is a choice. You do not have to attend every argument you are invited to. By stepping into the arena with a clown, you do not become a gladiator. You just become part of the circus. Real power is looking at the chaos, recognizing it for what it is, and consciously deciding to keep your energy in your pocket. This is the foundation of emotional sovereignty. When you refuse to argue, you immediately strip them of their primary weapon, your own emotional investment. You leave them swinging at thin air. The concept of frame control. In any social interaction, there is a dominant frame. The frame is the underlying reality, the set of rules that dictate how the interactions will go. Toxic people are masters at trying to impose their twisted frame onto you. They want you to enter a reality where you are the villain, where you have to explain yourself, and where they hold the moral high ground. The moment you start defending yourself, you have accepted their frame. You have admitted that they are the judge and you are on trial. This is a catastrophic loss of power. To make a toxic person powerless, you must maintain your own frame at all costs. Your frame must be built on the unshakable belief that their opinion is irrelevant to your reality. If someone accuses you of something absurd, defending yourself validates the accusation as worthy of discussion. Instead, a strong man holds a frame of absolute indifference. You look at them not with anger, but with mild amusement or total boredom. You project a reality that says, "Your words have zero impact in my world." When their frame crashes against the solid wall of your reality, they are left disoriented and entirely powerless. The power of the pause. We are biologically wired to respond immediately to threats. When a verbal attack comes, the primitive part of your brain screams at you to strike back instantly. But true mental superiority is found in the space between stimulus and response. Let us talk about the strategic pause. When a toxic person throws a covert insult or tries to bait you, do not answer right away. Just look at them. Hold eye contact for 3 to 4 seconds in complete, heavy silence. This is devastating to a manipulator. They expect rapid-fire defense. When you give them silence, you create a psychological vacuum. The pressure shifts entirely onto them. In that silence, their toxic comment hangs in the air, echoing back to them, revealing how foolish they sound. They will usually start to backpedal, nervously laugh, or try to fill the silence with more words, exposing their own insecurity. You have done absolutely nothing, yet you have completely dismantled their attack. What separates an elite thinker from a reactive child is the ability to endure silence. You do not owe anyone a quick response. By slowing down the interaction, you control the pacing, and the one who controls the pace controls the outcome. Emotional detachment versus suppression. A critical misunderstanding men have is confusing emotional suppression with emotional detachment. Suppression is biting your tongue while you boil with rage inside. You are forcing the anger down, but it is still burning you alive. This is unhealthy and unsustainable. A toxic person will eventually see the cracks in your armor. Emotional detachment, on the other hand, is a completely different mechanism. It is the ability to observe a toxic behavior without internalizing it. Imagine watching a crazy person yell at a wall in the street. You do not get angry at the crazy person, you just observe the madness from a distance and walk away. You must view toxic people in your life through the exact same lens. When they try to provoke you, realize that their behavior is a projection of their internal chaos, not a reflection of your value. You do not suppress your anger, because there is no anger to begin with. There is only cold, analytical observation. When you master detachment, their poison cannot even touch your skin. You become a fortress. This level of psychological distancing is what gives a man true, unshakable calmness in the face of absolute absurdity. The upgraded grey rock mechanism. You might have heard of the grey rock method, where you act as boring and uninteresting as a rock to make toxic people lose interest. But we need to upgrade this concept for the elite man. It is not just about being boring, it is about becoming an emotional black hole for their negativity. Toxic people are emotional vampires. They feed on your high-frequency responses, whether that is anger, sadness, or frustration. To make them powerless, you cut off their food supply completely. When you must interact with them, your responses should be short, monotone, and entirely devoid of emotional charge. Words like "okay," "understood," or "maybe" become your shield. You do not offer opinions. You do not ask questions. You give them absolutely nothing to grab onto. But the upgrade lies in your internal state. You do not do this out of fear or evasion. You do this from a place of supreme arrogance and strategic dominance. You are consciously deciding that they do not possess the clearance level required to access your emotional depth. By turning into an emotional black hole, you starve the toxic person, forcing them to look elsewhere for their twisted supply of validation. Mirroring their absurdity. Sometimes total silence is not an option, especially in professional environments. In these cases, you use a tactic called mirroring. When a manipulator makes a ridiculous demand or throws a passive-aggressive insult, you simply repeat their words back to them in a calm, inquisitive tone. If they say, "You always mess up these reports and make us look bad," you look them dead in the eye and say calmly, "You feel that I always mess up the reports and make the team look bad?" And then you stop talking. You let the words hang there. By mirroring them without emotion, you force them to hear their own absurdity. You are holding up a psychological mirror, making them confront the ugliness of their own behavior. Most toxic people operate in the shadows of implication and covert aggression. When you drag their words out into the cold light of day and lay them bare, they usually panic. They will try to backtrack or soften their stance. You have not argued. You have not defended yourself. You have merely reflected their toxicity back onto them. What distinguishes a powerful man is his ability to use the opponent's momentum against them, completely neutralizing the attack. The myth of winning an argument. There is a dangerous fantasy that men hold on to. The fantasy that if they just find the right words, if they just explain their logic clearly enough, the toxic person will suddenly realize their mistakes, apologize, and change. Erase this fantasy from your mind completely. You cannot win an argument against someone who is heavily invested in misunderstanding you. Toxic individuals do not operate on logic. They operate on ego and control. When you bring facts to an emotional manipulation, you are bringing a calculator to a knife fight. It is completely useless. Understanding this is incredibly liberating. Once you accept that closure is a myth and that winning is impossible, you stop trying. You stop wasting hours of your life rehearsing arguments in your shower. You accept that they will always see you as the villain in their story, and you become completely comfortable with that. Let them have their delusion. Your reality does not require their approval. True power is walking away from an unwinnable game and feeling absolutely zero need to prove your point. You leave them trapped in their own maze while you walk out into the open sun. Redefining disrespect. Your ego is hardwired to detect disrespect and sound the alarm. When someone insults you, your ego says, "We must destroy them to protect our status." But an elite strategist knows how to reframe disrespect entirely. When a toxic person insults you, it has absolutely zero correlation with your actual value. It is merely data about their current mental state. If a toddler calls you an idiot because you will not let them eat dirt, do you feel deeply disrespected? No. You recognize that the toddler lacks the capacity to understand reality. You must apply this exact same framework to toxic adults. Their disrespect is a symptom of their broken software. It is a broadcast of their insecurities, their jealousy, and their inability to regulate their own emotions. Why would you allow someone with a broken mind to dictate your self-worth? When you truly internalize this, insults bounce off you like bullets off a tank. You stop feeling disrespected and start feeling a cold, clinical pity for them. What separates a strong man from the rest is his impenetrable self-image. He knows exactly who he is, and no words from a lower frequency individual can ever alter that fundamental truth. Radical acceptance of human nature. A major reason we get so frustrated with toxic people is that we secretly expect them to behave like rational, honorable human beings. We are shocked when the snake bites. But why are you shocked? It is a snake. That is what it does. Radical acceptance means looking at the world with brutal realism. There are manipulators. There are liars. There are narcissists. They exist. They have always existed, and they will always exist. You must stop wishing for a world where everyone plays fair. When you accept the reality of human darkness, you stop being emotionally derailed by it. You anticipate it. You observe the toxic person and think, Ah, yes. Here is the manipulation phase right on schedule. You become an anthropologist studying a predictable species. This shift in perspective is incredibly powerful. You move from being a victim of their behavior to an observer of it. You do not get angry at a storm for raining on you. You just open an umbrella. Radical acceptance is the ultimate umbrella. You accept their nature without judgment, and in doing so, you completely remove their ability to surprise or hurt you. You remain untouchable. The invisible shield of high-value men. Have you ever noticed that truly powerful, high-value men rarely get entangled in petty drama? It is not because they never encounter toxic people. It is because they have an invisible shield. This shield is built from an intense focus on their own mission. When your life is driven by massive goals, heavy responsibilities, and a clear vision, the drama of small-minded people becomes practically invisible. You simply do not have the bandwidth to care about a colleague's passive-aggressive email or a relative's subtle insult. You are operating on a completely different frequency. Toxic people can sense this. They look for easy targets, people who are bored, insecure, and desperate for interaction. When they approach a man who is deeply anchored in his purpose, they feel an immediate repulsion. They realize that their tactics will not work here. To make toxic people powerless, you must become so obsessed with your own growth, your finances, your fitness, and your legacy that their noise sounds like a distant whisper. What distinguishes the elite man is that his attention is his most guarded asset. He refuses to spend a single second of his focus on anything that does not build his empire. Tactical agreement to defuse the bomb. This is a highly advanced psychological maneuver. When a toxic person attacks you with an exaggerated criticism, the instinct is to deny it. But denial fuels the argument. Instead, use tactical agreement. You agree with a grain of truth in their statement, or you agree with their right to feel that way without accepting the underlying insult. If someone says, "You are so selfish, you only ever think about your own projects," you do not argue your generosity. You calmly say, "You are right. I am extremely focused on my goals right now." You agree with the factual part of the statement, but you completely remove the negative emotional charge. It is like a judo throw. They push against you with all their might, and instead of pushing back, you just step aside and let them fall flat on their face. They are expecting resistance. When they meet zero resistance, their aggressive energy has nowhere to go. They look foolish and feel immediately disoriented. Tactical agreement is not submission. It is a masterclass in disarming an opponent. You agree with the logic, discard the emotion, and leave them with absolutely nothing to fight against. The concept of emotional economy. Think of your emotional energy as a bank account with a strict daily limit. Every time you get angry, every time you stress over a toxic comment, you are spending your emotional capital. An elite strategist treats his emotional economy with the utmost ruthlessness. Would you pay $1,000 for a piece of trash you found on the street? Of course not. So why are you spending massive amounts of emotional capital on a worthless opinion from a person you do not even respect? You are making a terrible investment. When a toxic person tries to provoke you, you must instantly calculate the return on investment. If I engage, what do I gain? Nothing. What do I lose? My peace, my time, my focus. The math is simple. Decline the transaction. By viewing every interaction through the lens of emotional economy, you detach from the heat of the moment and make cold, calculated decisions. Let the toxic person go bankrupt with their own drama. What separates a truly strong man from the rest is his absolute refusal to finance someone else's emotional chaos. He hoards his energy for building his own life, leaving the manipulators broke and starving. Physical mastery and body language. Words are only a small fraction of communication. You can say nothing and still look like a victim. Your body language must scream absolute indifference. When confronted by a toxic individual, average men become physically tense. Their shoulders rise, their breathing becomes shallow, and their eyes dart around. This signals prey behavior to the predator. To assert dominance without a word, you must master your physiology. When the chaos starts, consciously drop your shoulders. Slow your breathing down to a deep, rhythmic pace. Relax your jaw. Keep your movements slow and deliberate. Do not cross your arms in a defensive posture. Keep your body open, signaling that you do not perceive them as a threat at all. If you are sitting, lean back slightly. This physical state of total relaxation sends a powerful subconscious message to the toxic person's brain. This man is unbreakable. I have no power here. Often, controlling your physiology actually forces your mind to calm down. The body leads the brain. By projecting the physical presence of a lion observing a loud bird, you instantly command the environment and crush their attempts at intimidation. Amputation of toxic ties. We must address the most brutal yet most effective strategy, the silent amputation. Society tells us we need to have closure, that we need to explain to people why we are cutting them off. This is a trap. When you explain your departure to a toxic person, you give them a roadmap of your vulnerabilities. You give them a final opportunity to manipulate, guilt trip, or gaslight you. The most powerful move you can make is to simply disappear from their reality. No grand speeches, no final arguments, no long text messages. You just stop initiating contact. You remove them from your digital life. You become physically unavailable. This silent amputation is agonizing for a toxic person because it deprives them of the final dramatic scene they crave. It leaves them with a void. Walking away without an explanation is the ultimate assertion of power. It says, "Your behavior has disqualified you from access to my life, and you are not even worth the effort of an explanation." What distinguishes an elite man is his willingness to ruthlessly prune the dead branches from his life tree. He does not negotiate with poison, he eliminates it. The trap of the ego. Let us dig deeper into the real reason you get hooked into these conflicts. It is your ego. The ego is terrified of looking weak, of being wrong, or of being publicly humiliated. Toxic people are expert ego hackers. They know exactly which buttons to push to activate your pride. They will attack your competence, your masculinity, or your intelligence, knowing that your ego will force you to defend yourself. To become immune to toxic people, you must conquer your own ego. You must reach a point where you do not care if a manipulator thinks they won. Let them tell their friends they defeated you. Let them believe they are superior. Why do you care? The ego demands external validation. The elite mind generates internal certainty. When your ego is silent, there is nothing for the toxic person to grab onto. You become slippery, untouchable. You can look a toxic person in the eye, hear them call you a failure, and genuinely feel nothing because you know your own truth. Defeating a toxic person does not require fighting them. It requires defeating your own need to be validated by them. Kill the ego, and the manipulator loses all their weapons. Transforming poison into fuel. True Stoic alchemy is not just about blocking negativity, it is about utilizing it. Every time a toxic person tries to bring you down, they are exposing a weakness in your own emotional armor. If a comment about your career makes you angry, it is because deep down, you have an insecurity about your career. The toxic person is actually doing you a favor. They are acting as a stress test for your psychology. Instead of getting mad at them, you must use their attack as a diagnostic tool. That comment bothered me. Why? What do I need to fix within myself so that this never hurts again? You take their toxic poison and you turn it into high-octane fuel for your own self-development. You use their doubt to fuel your late-night work sessions. You use their disrespect to fuel your gym workouts. You let their negativity drive you to levels of success they cannot even comprehend. What separates a strong man from the rest is this alchemical ability to consume chaos and excrete power. When toxic people realize that their attempts to break you are only making you stronger, faster, and more ruthless, they will flee from you in terror. Setting boundaries without negotiations. Most men misunderstand what a boundary is. They think a boundary is a request. Please do not speak to me like that. That is not a boundary. That is a plea for mercy. A real boundary is a unilateral rule that requires zero cooperation from the other person. It is a statement of fact about what you will do. You do not negotiate it. If a colleague starts yelling at you, you do not say, "Please lower your voice." You say, "I do not engage in shouting matches. Let me know when you are ready to speak calmly," and then you physically leave the room. You have not asked for permission. You have dictated the terms of reality. If they continue to cross the line, the consequence is automatic and non-negotiable. You withdraw your presence, your resources, or your attention. Toxic people push boundaries because they are used to people folding under pressure. When they hit a boundary made of solid titanium, a boundary that enforces itself without anger but with absolute coldness, they shatter. The elite man does not argue his rules. He simply enforces them with the ruthless efficiency of a machine. The ultimate revenge is indifference. We all have a dark desire for revenge when we have been wronged by a toxic person. We want to see them suffer, to realize their mistakes, to beg for forgiveness. But pursuing revenge keeps you tethered to them. It keeps their energy entangled with yours. The Stoic philosophers understood that the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. But let us modernize this. The ultimate revenge is massive success and total indifference. It is building a life so incredibly vast, wealthy, and fulfilling that the toxic person becomes a microscopic speck of dust in your rearview mirror. You do not wish them harm. You simply forget they exist. Imagine a toxic person checking your social media or hearing about you years later hoping to see you broken, only to find you thriving at a level they can never reach, and realizing that you have completely forgotten their name. That is true destruction. You make them powerless not by destroying them, but by outgrowing them to such a degree that they cease to exist in your dimension. Focus every ounce of your energy on your own elevation, and let gravity take care of the rest. The power of assumption. One of the most effective mental frameworks against toxic behavior is assuming total ignorance rather than malicious intent. When someone throws a passive-aggressive remark, you deliberately misunderstand the insult. You take their words entirely at face value, completely ignoring the toxic subtext. If they say, "It must be nice to have so much free time to go to the gym," implying you are lazy at work, you respond with a bright, genuine tone. "It really is fantastic. Health is a priority for me. Thank you for noticing." You force them to either drop the attack or openly explain their malice, which makes them look like the villain. By refusing to acknowledge the hidden insult, you strip it of all its power. You treat them as if they are clumsy and socially awkward, rather than cunning manipulators. This infuriates toxic people because it denies them the cleverness they pride themselves on. It shows that you are so secure in your reality that their subtle jabs simply cannot penetrate. What distinguishes a powerful man is his ability to reframe the narrative on his own terms, forcing the manipulator into a corner of their own making. The absolute mastery of reality. To tie all these principles together, you must realize that dealing with toxic people is ultimately the highest test of your reality control. They are sent into your life to test the structural integrity of your mind. Will you break under pressure? Will you let a weaker mind dictate your internal state? The top 1% of men view these encounters not as burdens, but as sparring sessions. They use toxic people to sharpen their detachment, practice their silence, and fortify their boundaries. You now hold the blueprint to absolute emotional sovereignty. You know that arguing is a trap. You know that silence is a weapon. You know that your ego is the enemy, and your focus is your greatest asset. You no longer have to fear manipulative people, because you realize they hold absolutely zero power over you unless you willingly hand it to them. From this moment on, you are the architect of your emotional state. You are a fortress of solitude in a world of frantic noise. Let the manipulators play their games in the mud. You have empires to build. The game has completely changed. You now understand the hidden mechanics of emotional dominance. You realize that trying to destroy a toxic person with words is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. It only burns you. The top 1% of men walk through this world untouched, not because they do not face disrespect, but because they have mastered the art of making it completely irrelevant. They use silence as a sword and indifference as an impenetrable shield. Your power lies in the pause, in the cold observation, and in the absolute refusal to participate in a reality that you do not control. From this day forward, every time a manipulator tries to bait you, you will not feel anger. You will feel a quiet, elite amusement, knowing exactly how to starve them into submission without lifting a finger. If you found this level of psychological mastery valuable, you know what to do. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and join the ranks of men who refuse to be emotionally manipulated. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these strategies are you going to use the next time someone tries to test your boundaries? Drop your answer in the comments below, and let us see who is truly ready to take control. Stay strong, stay stoic, and never surrender your power.